On Friday mornings, just after 9 o'clock news, we talk about firearms on News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com. And we're joined in our discussion by Forrest Andersen from Washington Street Pawn here in Twin Falls. And he's joining us this morning as well. He's actually looking at some beautiful scenery, but we were just chatting a couple of minutes ago about firearms in the home, and I brought up some figures. There was a poll out this week that showed that the number of people who have firearms in their homes has grown to 44% of American homes, and that is up from somewhere in the low to mid 30s. That's quite an astounding new figure, as well as many of those sales are going to women. Women are buying firearms in record numbers, obviously, for self defense and for home defense. And Forrest, first of all, welcome back to the program.
Hey, Bill, how are you? It's awesome to be back. I'm sitting on a veranda in Mexico, looking over the ocean, and doing a little research what firearm laws are like in other countries. So
I was going to say
from
a
a
little stricter in
beach
Mexico,
chair.
from what I gather.
Oh yes, yeah. In fact, it's been a topic of curiosity. The cab drivers and stuff. They ask what you do, and when you tell them that you build and sell guns, or a lot of people, most people here have never even handled one. And I had a friend that came down here a few years ago. Well, the Shaws came to Mexico and were approached by some Mexican police to show them some techniques. And between four guys, they came up with 9 rounds of ammunition. So even the police and military are very restricted on the ammunition that they can have and things like that. So
I guess the Second
yeah, it's
Amendment is a
definitely a different
blessing.
world down
Yeah.
there.
Yeah, very much. We're blessed people right now, as long as we have that Second Amendment. Uh, we were talking off air about the number of people who are now having buying and keeping firearms in the home, and especially women. And I imagine a lot of those are single women too, as well. And you pointed out, if you're going to have them in the house and you've got children around, there's some specific steps people should be taking at this point, right?
Exactly. I mean, with gun ownership up to 44% of American households now, there's a lot of guns in homes. But as a parent, you need to take some steps. And the best step isn't, I mean, you should make that gun secure when you're not there. But the biggest thing you can do to protect your family if you have a gun in the home, as far as safety goes, is to take them out and make them familiar with the operation. Now, that might sound counterintuitive, but honestly, it is. If a gun is, if the only familiarity your kids have with a firearm is what they see on TV, they see people get shot and get up and run away all the time. When in real life, that's not the way it works. The technique I use with my children is when they get old enough to comprehend, 5 or 6 years old, I take them out and I'll take a cantaloupe or a watermelon or something. And I'll shoot that cantaloupe or watermelon and I'll say, okay, now this is what a bullet does. And I'll show them the big hole in the cantaloupe or the watermelon, or maybe it explodes the whole thing. And I'll say, this is what a bullet does. It's not like on TV. And if that was myself or one of your brothers or, a friend, this is what would happen to them. And it's kind of a graphic example without being graphic, because it's a fruit. It's not an animal or something like that. And it kind of clicks in their mind then that this is a dangerous thing. With a firearm, you get one mistake sometimes. One mistake could be fatal. So it's something that you really need to take the time. If you're going to take a gun home, you need to take the kids, make them familiar with it, make them familiar with the operation so that if they find a gun laying on the ground, they could unload it and make it safe. Or they could, know to call someone. The rule my kids have is if they're ever in a friend's home and one of their friends produces a firearm, like says, hey, look at my dad's gun. Their rule is you run out of that house and you don't stop running until you find an adult.
Good
Like you
idea.
don't try to talk to them about it. You don't try to say, hey, put that down, because to them it's a toy, obviously. So they're not going to get it. So that's their rule. You run out of the home and you run until you find an adult.
I have a
You
couple of
don't try to
stories.
talk to them, nothing.
I got a couple of stories of my own that will go back to childhood. I can remember one time my dad told me to run up to his bedroom and get something out of the top drawer. And when I got there, there were two top drawers, and I opened one drawer, I think on the right hand side, and there was a pistol. And that's not what he asked for. So I just closed the drawer and opened the left hand side, grabbed whatever else it was that he needed. And I don't think I ever popped open that drawer again. And then another time I was with him. We'd gone out and done some shopping, and it was a cold winter night. We were driving home, and he saw an accident where a fellow had driven over an embankment into a marina, and he said, "Stay here." And he opened up the glove compartment of the car and he pulled a pistol out of there. And again, I never thought again to open up that glove compartment on my own. It didn't, as I say, he had trained us as kids from the time we were just about old enough to stand. And I don't think that we ever had an interest in picking anything up like that around the house. And so that's key because there will be people out there who say, just lock them up so the kids can't get anywhere near them and just leave them wondering or make them more suspicious. And I guess that locking things away without ever letting the children see how they work is probably not a good idea.
No, securing the firearm's not a bad idea. Get a touch safe or get a lock that you can operate in an emergency situation. Because the whole point of having a gun in the home is being able to access it and use it if you need to defend yourself or your family. But at the same time, you know, it needs to be secure enough that they can't get on it. But the best way to secure it, like my kids, honestly, they've been around guns. I've taken them shooting. I could lay a gun on the table, kitchen table, and leave it there, and they wouldn't even take two looks at it because it's not a curiosity to them anymore. They know what it's like to shoot a gun. They know how it operates. They know what it does, so they're not even curious about it. It'd be like setting a golf club on the table. They wouldn't even pay any attention to it because it's not a novelty anymore. And I think you need to take that out of the equation. You need to give those kids an experience of shooting it. Eventually that curiosity they develop by playing video games or watching TV is going to subside or go away, or at least they'll be familiar enough with what they do that they'll be like, okay, that's dangerous. I don't want to mess with that.
I think that our culture, by the
So,
way, if I could interrupt for a moment, our culture. I
yeah,
remember watching Saving Private Ryan, and there was the guy who was up in the tower, the sharpshooter, and I think they also had a character like that in Band of Brothers. And these were people that the reason we had so much success, I think, in war with sharpshooters and the like, and even people in more recent history, uh, is because young people in this country, in many cases, especially in rural areas, have grown up with a respect for firearms, but also handling firearms. So at 18, they're not learning just overnight. They have, in many cases, by the time, for instance, they might join the military, they've already been handling firearms for 12, 13, 14 years.
yeah, exactly. Like Carlos Hathcock, our one of our greatest snipers in Vietnam. He was a Southern boy. Since he was 5 years old, he was shooting squirrels with a 22. So he just had that natural gift with a firearm, and that comes from handling them. And I think at this point is you don't have to make your kid a future special forces hero, but I think you have a responsibility to take them out, familiarize them with the workings of the gun, and then let them see the power of the gun. Because honestly, you get one mistake, you get one chance to make a mistake, and if you make it wrong, then someone could die. So that's one thing you don't want to screw around with. It's something that you really want to take time. If you're going to send your kid to soccer practice and spend all that time getting them to soccer and back, something that that maybe they get a college scholarship, they're really good. You know, you certainly have the same obligation with a firearm.
By the way, we got a couple of minutes before the first break. When it comes to the women buying these firearms in record numbers, as I said, I think some of them probably are single, and so they're thinking I need some sort of self defense around the home. Others may be single moms too as well, and some of them live in parts of the country where it's obviously it's not as safe as, let's say, southern Idaho. I'm Women especially, I mean, should think about training because I think a lot of them. I know my sister had a little bit of training from my dad, but not nearly as much as he gave to my brother and to me. Obviously, they need. You just can't obviously buy one and then put it put it somewhere in the house without actually getting. We've talked about this, I know, to some degree, but are there special courses or programs for women who are now buying firearms?
Yeah, we actually just did a group class through Washington Street Pond. We had 30 women, and we just did a women's only beginner class. And it was a fantastic success. Everybody had a great time. We had different levels there, and now that class we're going to take to another level. We're going to do a second class with them. It's going to be more advanced shooting. You know, the first class is becoming familiar with your firearm, safety features, learning how to manipulate that trigger, learning how to hit the target. In class two, we'll work more on your draw, more on your reloads, more advanced shooting. Um, but yeah, and you know, for women just getting into it, selecting the right firearms a big importance. You know, a lot of guys will be like, "Oh, go get a 44 Magnum or go get some huge caliber that if it's not enjoyable to shoot, you won't practice with it." And let's face it, to defend yourself, the only bullet that matters is the one that hits the target. So you can defend yourself just fine with a 22 or a 22 Magnum if you can hit the target, much better than if you're carrying a 45 and you can't hit the target.
Now, I had a friend who was telling me not long ago she's planning on buying a Derringer, and another friend bought a pistol, and it's small enough she can carry it in her purse. That's the other thing too. Some certain firearms, women obviously are not always smaller, but certain firearms probably wouldn't be wise for women, and there might at least be better choices when it comes to some of these things.
Yeah, well, small's not necessarily good. The only reason you'd get a really small gun is if you're going to concealed carry. If it's a gun you're only going to keep in your home, buy a bigger one. First of all, it's going to be more enjoyable to shoot. It's going to be it's it's going to have a longer sight radius. It'll have a longer barrel, so you'll be inherently more accurate with it. The smaller the gun, the more the recoil. So you have to take that into account. Just because you have a girlfriend and so you buy her a teeny little dainty gun in a big caliber, that gun's going to be no fun to shoot. It's going to be a rodeo every time you pull the trigger.
In other words, well, we've got a break coming up. Well, let's pick that up on the other side of the break. But very quickly, before we get to the break, what's the Facebook page for people who'd like to check out Washington Street Pawn?
Yeah, it's just right there on Facebook. Just check us out, Washington Street Pawn. We've got some silly stuff on there. We've got some promotions on there, or just stop into the shop. You know, we're knowledgeable and we're easy to talk to. You know, there's no wrong questions, and we'll help guide you. We're not interested in selling you anything specific. We want to sell you what you're going to be happy with.
We've got more coming up with Forrest Andersen from Washington Street Pawn in just a moment. You're listening to News Radio 1310, KLIX, and newsradio1310.com. Bill Colley with you as well on Top Story. Joining us this morning, Forrest Andersen. He is from Washington Street Pawn here in Twin Falls, and he takes some time out with us on Friday mornings that we talk about issues related to firearms, firearms safety, firearms training, and, of course, the Second Amendment. It's 9:23. Bill Colley with you as well on Top Story at 64. And just before we went to the break, we were talking about people who buy these small pocket guns for their girlfriends or wives. And the fact of the matter is that if the recoil is strong enough, it does not help necessarily in self-defense. And I joked with you off air. Sometimes, of course, it's similar. It's a little bit of a different story, but that movie True Grit, where the young girl was trying to fire a cannon basically in her hands, and it knocked her over every time because of the recoil with it. You can't really defend yourself if you get knocked down, and you're not necessarily saying that's going to happen, but it takes you a little bit more time to recover and aim a second time if you didn't hit the target the first time around. And I think that's what the concern is, right?
Yeah, exactly. When we work with Houston Shaw Shooting, we talk about, a proficient shooter should be able to put a bullet on target every quarter second. And you think about, well, it only takes me 3/4 of a second with this caliber. Well, what that translates to is that if in a self-defense situation, is if they're shooting back at you and they're proficient, they're going to be putting 3 shots on you for every 1 going back. That's not great odds in your favor. They're getting 3 for your 1. That's why it's important to buy a gun the correct size for your application. If you're going to conceal carry, you need a small gun, but you should probably buy a little bit smaller caliber, a 380 or a 22 Magnum or a 22. 22 works fine for self-defense because all you're trying to do is eliminate the threat. And if that threat, one shot with a 22 is going to eliminate most threats. Whether you take them down completely or not, they're going to be going the other direction. And that's the whole goal, is to just create a safe situation for yourself. But I think guys go out and they'll be like, "Oh, my girlfriend's tiny, so I want the biggest caliber I can get and the smallest gun I can get." Here's the problem: you're going to take them out shooting. They're going to shoot that gun one time, and they're never going to want to shoot it again. So they'll never become a proficient shooter. If you buy them a caliber that's manageable, that they enjoy shooting, they'll shoot a lot, and they'll become very good. Most women end up being better shooters than their boyfriends or their husbands because they've never shot before. And if you take them to a class like Shaw Shooting, then they will learn the proper techniques, where guys have been shooting the wrong way for 30 or 40 years. These women are going to learn the right way right off the bat, and they're going to become better shooters.
I watched a movie the other day called Lucy, and the main character, she grabs a pistol away from one of the bad guys, and just with one hand on it, she shoots about 4 or 5 of them in a row. That's another part of this. You mentioned earlier, television and movies don't really give us an accurate look at this. And if women see that and think it's that easy as well, there was no recoil while she was shooting people as well. This is why they have to go to a training course.
Yeah, exactly. Take a good class. You can stop by and see us. There's a couple trainers that we recommend. We really recommend Shaw just because of the facilities and the experience they have. But there's other people we recommend as well. And then get the right gear. Come see us. We'll help you get the right gun. And then, like I said, call Ryan Kelso at Rock Custom Holsters. He's on Facebook too, ROK Custom Holsters. And then he'll make a holster that's super comfortable for you, that once you strap it on, you'll never even know you're wearing it. If you wear a dress most of the time, he can figure something out for that. If you wear slacks or don't wear a belt, he can figure out something for that. If you're going to spend $300 or $400 on a gun, spend $70 and buy a really quality holster. But yeah, I just think it's crucial. I think it's crucial that you get trigger time, and you'll never get trigger time. Your girlfriend will never get trigger time if they're shooting a gun that's intimidating and has too much recoil and it's not enjoyable to shoot.
In other words, they'll decide
That's
they
a
want
big
to do
mistake
something
people
else.
make with children and women, is they'll get them a huge caliber and think it's funny when they shoot it when it knocks them down or the gun falls out of their hand. Well, all you've done there is made them never want to shoot ever again.
Which, of course, defeats the purpose, doesn't it?
Yeah, it defeats the purpose. Now, forever, they're going to be scared of shooting a firearm, which is just idiotic. Give them a small caliber. It's enjoyable to shoot. Make it fun. And as they get more comfortable, they can progress to bigger calibers. As they get the fundamentals of their grip, as they get the fundamentals of their trigger manipulation, as they get those things down, they'll enjoy it more, and they can move up in calibers if that's what they decide to do.
Well, Forrest, we want to thank you much for your time today. And quickly, for people who'd like to know a little bit more about the shop, where can they find it?
We're 321 Washington Street in Twin Falls. We also have a sister store, Magic Valley Pawn, which is on Addison. Jimmy down there does a great job, and he's got a bunch of used firearms. And we sell new or used guns. If you don't see it on our shelf, it doesn't mean that we don't have it. I mean, we sell a lot of guns. It's hard to keep them in stock, but we can order anything and have it in within 2 days. So go find what you want. We'll beat their price. All of our guns come with a lifetime warranty, and we'll always take great care of you.
Hey, enjoy the sunshine for a few more days.
I will. I'm standing in the pool while we're talking. So it's not a horrible day. So.
Don't drop that phone. Forrest Andersen, thank you much. We'll talk to you soon. Take care. Bye-bye now. Forrest Andersen, of course, from Washington Street Pawn here in Twin Falls, joining us this morning. It's 9:30, 64 right now. One more half hour of the show left. Hey, did you know that Syrian immigrants who are coming to this country, refugees, coming to Los Angeles and New York, there's one Idaho city that's getting more than those two cities combined coming up.